Time for my favorite segment on this show, Money, Power, Politics. While President Trump found plenty of time to attack Fed Chair Jerome Powell while in Michigan today, his big speech to the Detroit Economic Club was supposed to be his big pivot to affordability. And so he claimed that after 12 months in office, he had already delivered, quote, the strongest and fastest economic turnaround in our country's history. Oh, and inflation is apparently defeated. Watch this.
We have quickly gone from the worst numbers on record to the best and strongest numbers. Our spirit is restored. Inflation has stopped. Wages are up. Prices are down. Our economy is booming like I think you'll see soon, like never before.
Brendan Greeley, contributing editor at the Financial Times, joins me now, and Max Chafkin, Bloomberg Business Week journalist and host of the Bloomberg podcast, Everybody's Business. That's such a great podcast name, Max. Okay, Brendan, we all heard the president, okay? But today's inflation report found prices rose 2.7% in the last year. But again, you heard the president. Why is the president saying that?
Man, I think sometimes it's important to just point out that he's making things up. I mean, I know that we all know that, but when you listen to what he's saying, it was a disaster. We turned it around. Neither of those things are true. I keep trying to describe this economy as a meh economy, right? It's not awful. You can do a lot of terrible things to the American economy. It's a big, resilient economy full of consumers who like to buy things. It's very hard to completely screw it up. But it's also impossible to look and find the evidence that we're in some incomparable boom or even anything that could be remotely defined as a boom. When we look back to the most recent GDP growth numbers we have, we're looking at 4.3% growth. That's great, but almost all of it, and in particular the investment part of it, which is sort of how people look forward to the future, can be explained through spending on AI data centers. So it's very difficult to say that there's really anything going on in the American economy other than a lot of spending on AI. Inflation, same story. You know, we're not down to the 2% goal that the Fed has set for itself. There are some lingering questions about food prices, which are the ones that count the most to actual people and the way they think about prices. So it is hard to look at the actual data and see what he's describing.
Yeah, you know, as we were talking about this earlier today in preparation for all the shows tonight, Max, it really struck me that it feels like Americans are living in two economies right now. Because if you are a high-income person with a lot of money in the market, for example, things do feel great because they are. The people who are investing in AI and all these other things, they're making money. But if you are not in that category, if you are in the other, the everyone else category, it feels very bleak. People are pinching pennies. So how are Americans in the second category, how are they supposed to feel about the president claiming the economy has never been better?
I mean, it's tough, and this is why you've seen some election results, you know, go in the direction that the president doesn't like. It's also why you see President Trump suddenly talking a lot about affordability, or at least trying to gesture towards affordability. I mean, the thing Brendan is saying about inflation, it did come slightly below what economists were expecting. So I guess you could call it a win. But he continuously conflates prices with inflation and talking about, you know, maybe lowering inflation as if it's lowering prices. And to your point about American consumers, about normal people, grocery prices are going up. They're not going down. And there's no way around that. You can't statistic your way around that. Everyone sees it. And I think that's both an economic problem and a long-term economic problem for the United States, but it's also a political problem for President Trump.
Max, I want to get you to weigh in on something else the president said in his speech. He rolled out his plan for a one-year 10% cap on credit card rates. And then J.P. Morgan Chase warned that, quote, everything is on the table to fight it. The story, I think, of a lot of these Trump, some of the policies from the president are that sometimes he'll do something that sounds and seems on his face very progressive. But then the underlying infrastructure that ladders up to the announcement is either non-existent or not as progressive as folks thought. And so what J.P. Morgan Chase has said, I do think we should take them at face value. They're being serious. This feels like the closest we've come to a big business revolt since the president took office again. What's your take on this back and forth that we've seen?
I think you're right. It's ominous hearing J.P. Morgan say everything is on the table. I assume they mean product changes as well as maybe political stuff. I think you're right. I mean, I think big business made this bet on President Trump. And you know, President Trump has always been not the most ideologically reliable partner to anyone he works with. And you're sort of seeing that. Trump is looking at polling numbers. He's looking ahead to the midterm. He's trying to do or say something to help. I think it's also important to say he hasn't actually done anything. He's done a truth social, right? He's talked about this as if it has the force of law, but it's just a tweet. I mean, it's just a truth. And so until something actually happens here, I think it's probably worth being skeptical. It feels like it's talk for the moment, and you're seeing talk from both sides.
Yeah. He's sounding very progressive. Maybe there's no policy coming behind it, Brendan. We'll be watching. Okay, Brendan, I remember very distinctly last month, the president of Bank of America said that the markets would punish any manipulation with the Fed. So we don't have to worry about it. If they try to mess with the Fed, the markets will punish that. Well, investors had a very muted reaction to the investigation into Jerome Powell, but they are responding, in contrast, very strongly to this credit card rate fight. They're even sending the S&P into retreat after it hit a new record just yesterday. What does that tell you about where their priorities stand?
I mean, it's pretty clear that credit card rates are where banks make most of their profits, or at least a lot of their profits. This is a really important line of business for them. And to Max's point, you know, what Trump is doing by offering a cap on credit card rates that isn't even legislation right now, he's flailing because that is a really complicated problem. And there are a lot of different ways to go at solving that problem. There are, you know, perverse consequences from Dodd-Frank. The Fed doesn't seem to really have control over credit card rates anymore. There are a lot of different things going on there and a lot of different ways to attack them. And sort of the possibility of a 10% rate cap for a year doesn't seem to be a way to get at it. But I have to tell you, I'm as confused, saddened, disappointed as you are that nobody seems to be worried about the Fed. When we should have started worrying about the Fed when Trump tried to fire Lisa Cook last year. That is when markets should have said, this Fed is in danger of no longer being independent. That was unforgivable. And I thought the Fed should have come out with a stronger response when that happened. Okay, now Jay Powell responded, and I have to say, I've covered the Fed for 10 years. I've interviewed Jay Powell. When he came out with that statement on Sunday, my response was, Jay Powell, I'm sorry, I was not familiar with your game. It was a forceful, defiant condemnation of what the president was attempting. But, you know, those of us who cover monetary policy were texting and calling that evening trying to figure out what was going to happen. We're very carefully watching the dollar exchange rate against various other currencies. We're watching bond rates. We're trying to figure out what's going to happen. And it didn't really happen. You're absolutely right. I'm still trying to figure that one out. I think it's disbelief. I think the Fed has been the anchor of the global economy for so long. The people who, you know, participate in the global economy, who set bond prices, just can't possibly believe that it would ever be different. And that's a really dangerous assumption to make because things do change.
First they came for Lisa Cook, and it wasn't just about Lisa Cook. Max, Brendan, thank you both very, very much.